I want to talk about something that is a little bit controversial. When I say controversial, I mean that if there are females who are listening to this podcast episode, they, I feel, might disagree, although I feel like I'm going to have a pretty good argument here. I also feel like even some guys might disagree, and it is a pretty polarizing stance on the idea of vulnerability, being vulnerable with women, and being vulnerable in general. And that's what we're talking about today. The idea of vulnerability, this buzzword that has been around for the past 10 years. Women are preaching to men, be vulnerable. It's funny. People would probably think that this episode is the idea of toxic masculinity, but I think it's actually toxic that women are preaching for men to be more vulnerable around women. It's extremely toxic because it is giving them the exact opposite of advice of what works in terms of attraction. So let's dive in. Let's talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability. Okay, well, let's do something fun. Let's look up what vulnerable definition is. Vulnerable. Susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. That's interesting. Another one is, and this is what we're talking about here, in need of special care, support, or protection because of age, disability, or risk of abuse or neglect. Okay? So in need of special care or support. So a man who is being vulnerable to a woman or a woman who's being vulnerable to a man is someone who needs help, is in need of support, usually emotional support. And when I mean emotional support, I mean that's kind of what we're talking about here today in terms of when women are saying men should be more vulnerable and show their emotions and all that good stuff. So let's talk about this for a second. So first, let's break down the idea of what attraction is and what women are attracted to. And I know that this might seem so confusing to guys. That's why I wanted to do this episode, because you guys are hearing exact opposite stuff. You're hearing, when I say exact opposite stuff, exact opposite of what I'm saying today, right? You're hearing from women, men are so sexy when they're vulnerable. Men are so sexy when they show their emotions. So I actually do believe that. I do believe that if a man shows vulnerability like 1 or 2 times maybe, that there might be this slight, by the way, not this insane attraction, a slight bit of attraction where the girl's like, oh, wow, he can also be a little bit vulnerable. I think that if it happens 1 or 2 times, okay, maybe that is true. There is this kind of little bit of like connection or attraction that a woman might feel. Now, let's compare that, by the way, to a man with, let's say, broad shoulders who's chopping wood and taking care of business. I think that picture that I just described there versus man on the couch crying, I would say that a woman is going to be significantly more attracted to that one, right? The one of pure raw masculinity. Okay, so let's just say that. Now, back to what I was saying a second ago, attraction. Attraction happens when a woman feels a spike of emotions, and usually this is coming from when a man is displaying his masculine traits. Okay, so that is when attraction actually happens. And I think most people can agree with that. I don't think there's anyone out there who would think that that's something that isn't the way of attraction, right? I think that's what happens, right? When a man sees a woman and he's attracted to her, it's because of her feminine traits. When a woman is attracted to a man, it's because of his masculine traits. But then all of a sudden, all this vulnerability stuff came about. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how it happened. There's a lot of theories. I don't know. Maybe because our parents, the baby boomers, softened up and taught, the kids to be more soft. I don't know. Whatever it is, I don't really want to get into that because I don't have much information. I really just want to talk about the facts of how this all works in terms of attraction to help you, okay? So whatever the reason is, it's popular, it's talked about. So women are saying to men, be more vulnerable. And what's happening is when you hear that advice, let's break this down. When you hear the advice, be more vulnerable, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to try to do that, right? Let's just assume you are listening to that advice and it's from a woman and she's telling you because she is telling you how attraction works because it's her experience. So all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be more vulnerable. So you start to cry in front of your significant other. So you start to talk about your emotions all of the time. So you end up talking about any emotion that comes up, whether it be depression or anxiety or frustration or anger, and you're just metaphorically vomiting all these emotions on the woman because you're like, hey, women think it's sexy. Being vulnerable, that's what vulnerability is. And according to our dictionary here, I'm reading it right now, in need of special care support. So you become this needy, weak person. That is what you are displaying. I mean, let's be honest. If someone is consistently vulnerable, it is a weakness. I don't think anyone could argue with that either. Someone who's vulnerable consistently is weak. Now, I know what people might say. This is where the interesting part comes in. A woman might say to that, well, of course, you shouldn't always be vulnerable. If you're always talking about your emotions or you're always doing that, then yeah, of course, that's going to be unattractive. And I can imagine the other side, the women saying something like that. Like, well, yeah, that's too much. You can't be consistently vulnerable or needy. A woman's not going to like that. Okay. So then my question back to a woman or anyone else, a man, whatever, anyone else who's really fighting for the vulnerability movement, okay? It's funny sentence there, vulnerability movement, but that's what it seems to be. So anyone on the side of the vulnerability movement might say, well, you just want to be vulnerable once in a while. Okay. Well, what's vulnerable once in a while? Is that once a week? Is that every other day? Is it once a month? Is it once a year? And of course, who the fuck knows, right? Like, no one knows the answer to that. You just be kind of guessing. Like, oh, you should be vulnerable once a week. It's like, huh? What? That's not advice. That's not practical advice. Good advice, which I really do my absolute best, and I think I'm pretty good at it here on the podcast and everything else, is to make it practical. Because what's advice if you can't use it? And what's the point of getting advice if you can't get results from it? So if we're just talking about, okay, once a week, this, every other day, whatever it may be, you can't do anything with it. What are you going to do? Just pick? Like, okay, it's Tuesday. Last Tuesday I was vulnerable. Let me sit down with my girlfriend or the girl I'm dating. Let's talk about emotions. Or should we do it once a week? To me, once a week seems like a lot, right? That's a lot to be showing, I don't know if we call it feminine qualities, maybe feminine qualities, but not masculine qualities. So that's why, to get to a point here, it's like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do, Trip? Well, that's why I say just never be vulnerable. Never be puking out your emotions. And the reason why I say never is because that's practical advice. Because it's something that you can use. You could use that. I'm not saying it's easy, but you can use it because you're not sitting here thinking, well, it's been 1 week ago or 2 months ago. You're not thinking that. You're just like, oh, that's the rule. Just let's not do this. Okay? Now, here's the thing. This is where feminists might come in. Even though it's funny, I'm considered a feminist. I mean, most people are just because they believe in the equality of women. But, these third wave feminists, they'll come in and they'll say something to the degree of, well, this is the problem. Toxic masculinity. Men never showing their emotions. Suicide rates are up. And by the way, I agree with that. That's right. I have heard from statistics that suicide rates across men are up. Or I don't even know if it was up or they're higher than women, whatever it may be. Again, I'm not arguing for that side, but that's things I've heard. It's like that is dangerous. That is dangerous when a man can't show his emotions. And so this is what I'm trying to say here. I never ever say, don't ever show your emotions ever to anyone. What I'm saying as a dating coach to help you get results in your dating life is that you should not be showing your emotions to your girlfriend, your wife. And I'll get more specific on what that means in a second because that is kind of vague advice as well. But before we get to that, just what I'm saying here is you should not be showing your emotions to the woman who you are having a sexual relationship with. If you want your sexual relationship and your sexual attraction to die, vulnerability, would be the answer. So the answer is don't do it at all. And when you need to, and so here's the point here, you don't need to hold in your emotions. You have your male friends for that. You have your family for that. You have a coach for that. I get very vulnerable with my clients. My clients get very vulnerable with me. Fantastic. Fantastic. They should. They have therapists for that. They have psychiatrists for that. There's a lot of people that are going to be there for you in your vulnerable stages. And I really encourage you guys to use those resources. It is very unhealthy to hold in your emotions. It is very healthy not to process what's going on because it can cause more anxiety, more depression, and then what's good in that? That's not going to help you as a human. It's not going to help you in this world. So the answer is don't go to women to be vulnerable. Okay? Now, when I say to you, never do it, obviously that's a hard thing to do, to not show emotions, anxieties, sadness to your partner. So, of course, you're going to slip, and that's okay. That's fine. You're not going to bat 100%. It's not possible. I don't bat 100% in my relationship with that. There are times when I do show my vulnerability. And that's because we are human and we make mistakes. But you're still going to be okay. See, once I say to you, well, be vulnerable, it's such weird advice. You should be vulnerable once a week, twice a week, once a month, or whatever it is. It just becomes ridiculous. It's like you'll already naturally do that and it will be fine. Life happens, stress happens, your emotions will show. Now, to get more specific on the emotions, I don't mean you walk around like a robot. Like, it's okay every once in a while to feel anger. It's okay every once in a while to feel these things. Okay, that's fine. You might have a day at work that was so tough on you. So tough on you. By the way, if you're having consistent days of work that are so tough on you, I would get a new job, right? Obviously, that's not a good job for you. But life happens. I have stressful days at work, and it's just I show it. I'm wearing it on my sleeve that day because it was a really intense day. That happens from time to time. But what I'm not going to do is sit there and just vomit out all these emotions and stuff. It's like, I know that's not attractive. And also, there is something to be said about dealing with your emotions, right? About saying, okay, I'm not going to sit here and pout all day. I'm going to do something about it. So again, it's not about necessarily holding it in, but it's about solving the problem for yourself. How do I feel less anxious? How do I get to the point where I can feel less depressed? But I won't be talking to your girlfriend or wife about it, okay? And now a lot of guys, I know they've said to me, and I'm sure some of you are thinking this now, it's like, well, I want to do that. Well, I want to be able to have that kind of relationship. Let me tell you something. I have a relationship with my girlfriend, and there is plenty to talk about and plenty to do without me being vulnerable all the time. It's like people think like, oh, vulnerability is like, it's like, that's the way you connect with someone. I don't know about that. I think that you can connect with someone beyond having to show deep-rooted emotions. And again, I'm not saying be a robot. You can show emotions, but when it comes down to you showing any kind of weakness, women will be unattracted to that. They're like, oh, this guy's anxious all the time. Oh, this guy's depressed all the time. They're not going to be attracted to that. And any woman who's saying that they would be is lying. They're lying because they're just trying to prove their point. It's just not true. They will not be attracted to someone who's consistently emotional. So that's why you want to do it. I mean, never, right? But of course, it's just going to happen. It's going to come out from time to time. And there's other ways that you can connect. Like, it's okay. Again, I'm trying to get very specific here so you really understand. It's like, it's okay to, like, for example, I tell guys to get my book, the Magnetic. And inside of Magnetic, I'm actually opening up the book right now. There's a chapter called The 36 Questions That Makes a Woman Fall in Love with You. And it's 36 questions that was done in a study where people asked the questions, answered them, and some people fell in love. One couple actually got married. So I tell you specifically, take these questions and ask them. And they're vulnerable questions, but like they're not questions that's going to make you look weak or like you don't have your life together, right? So, and this is a way to connect with someone without being vulnerable. So here's some questions in here, like, what is your most treasured memory? Again, you might say, oh man, the best time in my life was this one time, blah, 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 blah. And of course, those are emotions. Okay, that's fine, right? That's fine to talk about that stuff. Let's see. I'm trying to look at some ones that are a little bit more towards the kind of negative. Like, share with your partner an embarrassing moment in your life. Like, that's fine, Yeah, that is technically being vulnerable, but talking about a time that you were embarrassed is not going to kill attraction. But it's a way where you will connect with each other. Here's one. Okay, so here's an example of a pretty intense one. Number 24 is, how do you feel about your relationship with your mother? So here's the thing, is there's different ways to go about this, right? Of course, let's just make this binary. You either have a great relationship with your mom or not so great. And of course, if you say it's great, then okay, great. And that's pretty nice, right? But let's say you don't have a good relationship with your mom. Well, there's a way to answer that, right? You could say it in the vulnerable, weak way, which is, yeah, I have a really bad relationship with my mom. It causes me a lot of anxiety. It's caused problems in past relationships. I just don't love my mom. I don't respect my mom. And it's just it's a disaster. And I'm still trying to get work and help with it. It's like, oh man, yeah, that's a little intense. I don't think we can call that as sexy, okay? But how about this answer? How about this answer if you're going through these questions with the woman and connecting? Yeah, I don't have, again, this is just an example of someone who doesn't have a good relationship with their mom. Yeah, I don't have the best relationship with my mom. We haven't talked in a couple of years, but yeah, I've been through therapy and I've gotten it handled, and really it's been tough throughout my life, but it's something I've been able to manage, and I've come out a lot stronger on the other side because of it. You see the difference there? It's like that is going to be attractive. A person who has it all together, who is capable of handling it. And if you don't have it handled, well, first of all, it's not good for your life. And also, it's just not going to be attractive. It's just how it works. Okay? Think about the most unattractive trait that you could think of in a woman. Just whatever that may be to you. For everyone, it can be a little bit different. Think about what that is. And so, what if I said, well, just go and date a woman who has that unattractive trait and just kind of deal with it? Like, you're not going to be able to deal with it. So, again, and it's interesting. It's interesting how women are spitting this out. It's toxic, and it's terrible for men because they're saying be vulnerable, and men are being vulnerable. And guess what? They're coming off weak to their women, and the women are unattracted. So they're literally giving them the exact advice that they need to unattract a woman.